We're going to have a Q&A now for about 45 minutes, and hopefully there'll be time. We're kind of running slightly behind schedule, but hopefully there'll be time for questions from the audience. But yeah, I'd like you to give a big round of applause for Claude Grunitzky and Tété-Michel Kpomassie. Thank you.
So what did you think? Right? I wanted to share a couple of anecdotes and factoids with you. When I was a teenager growing up in Paris, I had heard about the book that came out on a really important imprint by Flammarion, the French publisher. And I was thinking to myself, one day I'm going to meet this man. And so this is the day, I guess 30 years later, that I get to meet the man. So it's very moving for me to be on stage with you, Tété-Michel, because we have a lot in common. And one thing we have in common is actually in our family, the history of polygamy. And I always tell the story of my great-grandfather, Harry Grunitzky, who came from Poland to Togo and married 4 Togolese women and had 14 children. And I thought, wow, that was a very vigorous man. And then now I know your story of your father having 8 wives and 26 children. So he really upped the ante. And so I wanted to, before we get to Greenland, which is obviously what we're here to talk about and why you decided to make this life decision to explore your dream, I wanted you to tell us a little bit about your journey from Togo to Ghana, to Senegal, to Mauritania, to France, to Germany, to Denmark, to Greenland, when you were in that pursuit. So I'd like you to maybe give us a short history of that journey.
Yeah, thank you, Claude. First of all, I am very grateful to Johnny to have organized this symposium, enabling both of us to sit together. Claude, you just said that we are from the same country, but my late parents would be surprised to see both of us here together, because Claude's grand-uncle was the 2nd president of Togo. And when my father, my mother, and my aunts were attending meetings asking for independence, they would never think that their son will be, I would not say the same level, but will be sitting side by side in such, a symposium. But what has made this possible? It is Greenland. So Greenland introduces to each other. We live in the same country without knowing each other. So I am so grateful to Greenland too. Anyway, to answer your question, my journey was from Togo to through the European countries was just no, I was not a tourist. I had to work hard everywhere, and you know what? I've been to school only for 7 years, and I learned English with a book called L'Anglais sans peine. I had no money to buy the record, so I had
English without effort.
Yeah,
for those
I had to follow the pronunciations. I learned to say, my tailor is rich, and not my tailor is rich, for example. And I did that. I started reading French literature from the 15th century, starting by Rabelais, Montaigne, Molière, up to the first writer who taught me French was Gustave Flaubert. And when I came to France, I went to his house in Normandy to know how that man lived. Then, well, today I am published in the same collection as Gustave Flaubert. So I am so grateful to that master of mine. Well, I did petty jobs, all sorts of jobs along my way. But in Denmark, before buying my ticket for Greenland, I worked as a dishwasher in a restaurant. And that was the best job I have ever got, because all my food was free. I had my lunch, my breakfast, my lunch, and my dinner at that restaurant. So all the money I earned were simply saved, and I bought my ticket to Greenland. Well, I think it will take me hours to describe my journey, but shortly, that is what I did. But I will also say that I was appreciated by my employers all along my way. But after a year of work, I present my
resignation.
My resignation. They say, "Why, Michel? No, we appreciate you," and so on. And some say, "What a stupid idea to go to Greenland! But you may die before you reach the country, or in the country you will surely die because the weather is so cold you cannot survive." And my own Togolese countrymen used to say to me, "Well, what will be the outcome, even if you succeed? What will Greenland bring to you?" But I am very thankful to Greenland, because when I returned to Togo after that journey, my presence in my family caused a kind of inversion of values. Before leaving Togo, I was not allowed to interrupt adults while they were speaking. But when I came back, my grandfather, who was still in life, my father, all my aunts, say, "Only Tété will speak." And if any one of them interrupted, they said, "No." So that was quite another value Greenland has, how would I say, brought to me. So Greenland made me a man.
I want to maybe mention one more thing that we have in common, which is this kind of nomadic pursuit of freedom. So in my case, I was also a nomad, and I lived in Togo. I was born there. I lived there as a child in Washington, D.C., then London, and before that I was in Paris. And when I arrived in London in 1991, I remember buying a book also that changed my life. And that book was Imaginary Homelands by Salman Rushdie. It was a book of essays published by Granta, a really interesting publisher in the UK. And it just talked about having to fit into these Western societies when you're non-white. And being here in Brussels and speaking to these issues of migration, every time I come to Brussels and Europe, this obsession with migration and migrants coming into Europe, I'm so sick of that debate, but it's something that always comes up because it's such a political, divisive issue that is used by firebrands all over the place to gain power through populist means. And as a nomad, traveling to different countries and trying to fit in, as opposed to having the country fit around me, I realized that you have to adapt to whatever environment you're in. And that's why it's an imaginary homeland initially. So the question I have for you has to do with your initial disappointment with what you saw when you first reached Greenland. So you had something in your mind based on this book on Eskimos that was written by this French anthropologist, and you arrived and you saw something that was very different from what you had imagined. Can you share with us your early impressions on Greenland when you were in your early 20s?
I was disappointed by, as the documentary has mentioned, I was disappointed by the life people of the, Eskimos' life in the south, where they have no longer anything to do with their culture. I find that very sad, so sad. And it continues getting worse and worse. And I feel sick when I see that those people who have invented anorak. Anorak is an Eskimo word. It comes from the word anore. Anore means the wind. Anorak, which stops the wind.
Anorak, for those who don't speak French, and it's like those windbreakers that are very kind of heavy coats.
Yeah, but it is an Eskimo
word,
invention.
But for some reason, it's very much used in
an
France.
Eskimo word.
Yeah.
But it is very disappointing to see that those people today wear anoraks made in China. It is completely, stupid. It means that their way of life has disappeared. And another conviction I got after my first, because I have been altogether 4 times to Greenland up to now. And, I've said that I would like to end my life there, so I'm preparing, probably not the last journey, but another journey, probably for next year. Your question again?
In terms of the disappointment with the things that you saw, you had told me that obviously people had become alcoholics and they were very unhappy with their life, but the lifestyle had changed, and that's not what you had expected either. So in terms of the first perception of you as the first black man they ever saw, and the film does a great job of describing that in very few words, you were the devil that descended from the mountain, because that was what was in their imagination when they associated the black color with human beings. So as part of this whole imaginary homelands discussion, how are you able to strike friendships and even love with people who initially see you as the devil?
Well, when the children saw me, they started screaming and called me Tornasuk or Krivitok, which means the devil from the mountain. They were really afraid. The next morning when I woke up, in the house, the Eskimo house where I was welcomed, I saw that the children were around the house. And each time they saw me by the window, they say, "Ah, Una, Una, look at him, look at him." They were still afraid. Anyway, for many of them, I was just a cannibal. So I was wondering, those people who have never seen a black man before, how could they imagine that I was a cannibal? My grandfather has never seen his own grandfather eating human flesh. So how Eskimos have got that idea? When the children came close to me, I still remember one of the boys asked me, "Kanok aterapit?" I shook my head. I didn't understand. He pointed at himself. He said, "Wana akalumik aterapunga." And I say, "Una Maria mik aterapok." Ah, you want to know my name? So I say, Tété-Michel Kpomassie. Oh, they say, "Namik, Namik." It means no, Namik. Wangan. Tété-Michel Aterapunga. Ishlit Claude Aterapok. So I started understanding the language, the form of the verbs. In French, you say, "Je m'appelle, tu t'appelles, il s'appelle, 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 appelle, appelle, appelle." But in the Eskimo language, according to the situation, everything changes. So I said, "Ah, Tété-Michel Aterapunga." Ah, they say, "Oh, picoré, picoré," which means, "Oh, how clever." And then they went on spreading in the village that I am an intelligent man. And slowly, as Tété-Michel was too long for them, they called me Mikili Swak, which means Mikili Michel, Swak, tall, big, Mikili Swak. And so I was known in all the villages by that name, Mikili Swak. And slowly, I learned their language. And I came to understand that the word ichro, not igloo, not igloo as we people say in France, but ichro means simply a house. Igloo swak, for example, the White House in Washington is an igloo swak. Igloo swak, the big house. And when you ask, for example, an Eskimo, nak ata, where is your father? He will say, "Oh, ichro lurpok." He's building an igloo, but he's building a house. Atata silami ichro lurpok. Father is outside building a house. So I think that the difference between my stay with those people and the what other travelers have said is so completely sometimes absurd. Because when you use igloo here, you never think of a flat. A flat is an igloo. Here we are in an igloo for those people. Igloo can be made of ice, of a turf house, yeah, of turf,
Yes.
and wood, and even wooden houses. So I began learning all those things and became to know that in their language, the word white is kakotok, not kashlunak. Kashlunak means the stranger, simply. Black is kernatok. They could call me Kernatomyok, but they used just to call me African Myok. So we all in Africa, for them, are African mute. And those children, if you want to have a question, tell me.
Yeah.
Those children
Yes.
invited, they say, come and talk to us at our school. So I went to the school with them. I was invited by the children, not by the teachers. So what I told them a lot about Africa. We spoke about the lions, elephants, giraffes, but they were not interested by all those things because they have heard those things at the school. What puzzled them much is how does a tree grow? How tall can the tree reach? So in your country, there are many trees. Yes, I say many trees. And say, oh, you are black. Is your father black? Yes. Yes. Is your mother black? Yes. So your brothers, sisters, you are all blacks? I say yes. Say, how do you recognize yourselves at night? I say, yes, our nights last only a few hours. It doesn't last 4 months, 6 months. So just 24 hours later, we have the sun again, and the night, sun, night, and so on. And so they say, oh, that is why the sun is so tight with you that we don't see it very often here. And yeah.
I have a question, actually.
Yeah.
Let me interrupt. So it's fascinating to hear you talk about what you learned from them, in the sense that you learned from them and they learned from you. You learned how to make an igloo, you learned the local transportation with the dog sled, you learned how to eat the food,
Yeah.
and they learned from you about trees and everything else, about the sun. But then my question is, in that process, what did you learn about yourself since you spent more than 2 years there? What did you learn about yourself?
A lot. As an African child, I was always afraid in the forest because I couldn't see the horizon. I think it is the experience all of us have had in our childhood.
Yes.
When I came to
Those of us who were born in Africa and lived there in
those,
childhood.
those who are born, who were brought up in Africa.
Exactly.
But when I came to Greenland, where there were no trees, you have seen in the documentary that you have this dog sledge, and you follow the tracks. If you want to go to one village to the other, even if the village is at 100 kilometers, you follow the tracks of the preceding sledges. Mm-hmm. But when there is an oreille, when there is an oreille swak, when there is a storm, which balayer,
Which swipes.
Which slaps the tracks.
Yeah.
You have you don't have any indication. You don't know where you are. The earth is as white as the sky. You live in a completely white world. Even if you can see the horizon, you don't see any other thing around you. Remember, I was afraid in the forest. I came to a country without a single tree, I was still afraid to get lost. So it taught me a lot about myself. Was I afraid because of the forest, because of the trees? If so, why am I afraid to get lost in Greenland without trees?
Yes.
So that is something I thought a lot about. Another thing was that the first European, not a priest, but a pastor, who arrived in Greenland was Hans Egede, a Norwegian pastor, who started translating the Bible. And it was in 1721. He had a lot of difficulties. For example, give us our daily bread. The Eskimos have never seen bread before. They have no crops, they have no wheat, they have no... So for Hans Egede, how to translate, give us our daily bread? Then he translated it by, give us our daily seal. In Togo, my mother has never, in our village, my mother was not used to eat bread. We eat cassava, we eat kokwe, ablo, ema, makume, all the different dishes without bread. But yet, we were told, give us our daily bread. So I think that for both of us, the Eskimos and we, Africans, that idea of standing there and asking someone to bring us our daily bread is an insult. Because the hard life of the Eskimos, imagine that you have only snow to build your house. And you have to go out by a temperature of minus 30 degrees and 40 degrees. And you have done this before Jesus Christ was born. You have been doing these things thousands of years ago. And then there are people who come and say, you stay there and say, give us our daily bread. So I have also learned from myself that, well, we were just, on nous a trompés.
We were fooled.
Completely. We were fooled by people from outside. We also have religions. We have beliefs. But adapted to our environment. We, in Africa, we have Vodou, which is a religion. We have animism. I have known the animism of the Inuit people.
And there is a form of syncretism that you can relate to as well, which is very similar. The kind of syncretism that we have in Togo with the people practicing both voodoo and
I felt at home
and Christianity.
In Greenland.
Yes.
Yeah, spiritually.
Yes.
Yes.
So there's a lot in common between the two cultures, even though we're diametrically opposed, right? But I had maybe two questions for you before we open it up to the audience. One of them, in the BBC documentary that we just saw, is really showing Knut Rasmussen's kind of towering figure, as an influence potentially on you because he was an important explorer, a Danish explorer, and I want to understand why that might have been an inspiration for you.
Knut Rasmussen's mother was Eskimo.
Okay.
His father was a Danish priest.
Yes.
But he spoke Greenlandic.
Yes.
And not only Greenlandic, but Knut Rasmussen traveled from Greenland to Alaska and to Canada and met different tribes. Well, I don't like that word tribes, but met different Inuit populations
yeah.
speaking different dialects of the same language,
Yes.
which a European, you can take Amundsen, you can take Nansen, no one could speak the language. So Knud Rasmussen was able to speak that language.
Right.
So he was really respected. We say Knud Rasmussen, but in Eskimo, I mean in Greenlandic, his name is Kunu Ngwak. Ngwak means small, swak, big, Ngwak small. If in Greenland, if you travel to Greenland, you have there a boyfriend or a girlfriend. If your girlfriend is your girlfriend's name is Naya. Naya means the seagulls, but the girls like that name, Naya, and you call her Naya Ngwak, she'll be very happy. So Ngwak means small, but also
it's a term of endearment. It's a term of endearment.
Yeah,
Yes.
affectueux.
Yeah.
Yeah, un terme affectueux, a very affectionate term. And so Kunungwak means a lot. It is Kunungwak, it can be our Knud.
Right.
Yeah. But they don't say that same thing to Paul-Émile Victor. They don't say Victor Ngwak.
Right.
No,
they embraced him as a figure.
it's,
Well, it was one of their own.
Yeah.
I had one final question. Before I ask the final question, I want to do a bit of promoting of my fellow countryman, Tété-Michel Kpomassie, because one thing we're raised with in Togo is the value of modesty, and we're never supposed to self-promote or think we're better than everyone.
The value
and so, of modesty, it's a very important part of the Togolese culture, certainly in the way that we're raised. And I want to maybe give a little bit of background on how his book became such a huge, phenomenal success. And I'm going to ask the question later, but essentially what happened was he published a book in France on Flammarion, which is Gustave Flaubert's publisher, I think 1981. And that book won a lot of prizes, but it wasn't until the Brits actually caught on, and this article came out in the Times Literary Supplement in the UK on African and Greenland, that it really started gaining critical mass. So this is the original book, the Flammarion book, L'Africain du Groenland. And then it became so popular in Europe that Africa also claimed him. And so, right? So finally, when he was really big in Europe, he was really claimed by Africa. And the actually excerpts from the book are actually published in textbooks that are being taught in schools all over Africa. So this is for the actual reading book. So I mean, this is really, really important to mention that, because many African children growing up have had to read the story because it's such an extraordinary story. So my question, and I promise it's my final question before we open it up, is why did you decide to start documenting your journey and your time in Greenland? Did you already have a book in mind? What was the process for writing your daily adventures?
The very day I arrived in Greenland, I started writing my diary, because the ship took 8 days from Copenhagen to the first town. Anyway, I didn't know where I was going. The Greenland is so big, where I was going there. Fortunately, the ship I took was the first ship of the year, because the ice was a little melted, and it was a cargo with only 8 passengers. And I was so surprised that the nearer we were coming to Greenland, the longer the sun stays in the sky. And there came a day when at 11 o'clock in the evening, I could still read with the light of the sun. And from that day, in May till the middle of September, the sun was always in the sky. And at the end of September, the sun goes down and disappears for other 4 or 6 months according to the latitude. So when I came, I started writing my diary. And at the end of my journey, I had 660 pages. I started writing my book when I came back. As soon as I finished the first 70 pages up, I sent those pages to different publishers. I received my manuscripts back. Not interested. And one of the publishers accompanied my manuscript with a letter saying that, well, your adventure is interesting, but we don't see the people you are talking about. And your manuscript is just like a newspaper's report. So you don't creuser, you don't dig. I mean, the encounters, the people, I put that letter on the wall above my writing table. For 6 months, every morning I read that letter. I said, what do they mean? That they don't see the people? The man's name is Akaluk. I say Akaluk. I can see him, but why they don't see him? And then one morning, I understood finally the meaning of that letter. Flammarion wrote me that letter. So I started rewriting my book. It took me 5 long years. The 70 pages became 600 pages. Each line of the first manuscript became a chapter. And I don't leave the description before I finish what I was writing about. And when the book was, second manuscript was finished, I sent it to Flammarion again. The same editor who has forgotten that he has read the manuscript before, sent me the shortest letter I have ever had in my life. He wrote, I have received your manuscript, contact me at Odeon and telephone number and so on. So I phoned him and he said, oh, there are too many Eskimos in your book. we only see Eskimos. Can we cut some of them off? So he gave me an appointment. And when I arrived, I said, yeah, how can we do that? He said, all right, I will make a photocopy of your 600 page. In our collection, we need only 300. That means the half. So I will make a photocopy, and you keep the original, but please cancel half of the Eskimos. And I will do the same on my side, and in 1 month, we shall meet again and compare. So, well, I did that work overnight. I cancel. So when we met again and we compare, and I say, I cancel this, I say, oh no, 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 surtout pas ça. No, keep that, no, keep that. It is so interesting. It is so, I wanted to cancel the first 50 pages about Africa. Because in my mind, Africa has nothing to do with that journey. So he said, yeah, people will think that a helicopter took you there. So you must keep the those 50 pages. And finally, yeah, so the book came out as this form, which, yeah.
And so now that we're going to open it to questions, I can say this, but he can't say this. But I think the book has been translated into maybe 9 or 10 languages, and it's been in print since then. So this is major. I think because we're running out of time, I think we have time for 1, maybe 2 questions. So I don't know if anybody has a question. We have a microphone that's roving here.
Yeah.
Oh, one over there. Okay, Johnny. Okay. Does anybody have a question?
Yeah. Respect. I think for me the biggest thing was the respect that you had for their culture. Sorry. The biggest thing for me was the respect that you had for the Inuit culture when I was watching it, and how you managed to bring forward their culture so we can understand that it wasn't about you, it was more about them, and how you were fascinated by their culture and how they lived as a people. My question is, looking back at that, what was the emotions that were going through you as you were watching back your journey, and what were the thoughts and the feelings that came forth as you watched that?
Mon émotion.
En regardant maintenant, en regardant aujourd'hui, en regardant ces vieilles images, quelle est l'émotion?
Yeah, I think the documentary has shown the same emotion, my deception.
Disappointment.
My disappointment.
Initial disappointment.
My disappointment about the life. They have lost their traditional way of life, and that is my real disappointment. You know, when I told I came back home and I told my family that those people are hunters. So my grandfather said, yeah, you have just said that there are no trees. Where do they hunt? If they have no forest, where do they hunt? Well, they have never known forest. The problem with the Eskimos was that they were separated by the Indians who lived in the forest, in Alaska and in Canada. But they, Eskimos, or Inuit, only shares the seaside of that environment. And they have not any culture of, dealing with trees and wood. You have seen those houses built in wood, but with European design. So it's a great disappointment. I think that there could be some more imagination. You can use wood, but instead of having civil servants in the Danish government working with Greenland, I think they should have engaged some artists, Danish artists and Greenlandic artists, to think about the way of building houses there. I also mentioned what happened during the last World War, when Denmark was invaded by Germany, and Denmark could not supply some goods to Greenlanders. But after the war, the Greenlanders who could steal fish and hunt survived, which means that they are able to survive without an outsider help from outside. So it is the same in Africa too. I mean, the first European set foot in Africa in the 1700s, but thousands of years before that time, there were healthy people in Africa. So I think that, I mean, the disappointment can be on both sides. Yeah, but there is also something strange when I came back home. My Mina language,
which is our national, the most common language in Togo that we speak.
In the south of Togo.
South of Togo.
In the south of Togo. I didn't have the words to say icebergs, to say snow, and yeah. So one day I told my grandfather, I said, "Oh, imagine that all the white birds in the sky are losing their feathers. That is the way the snow falls." And then he said, "Tété, I know you have traveled a lot, but have you seen a country where there are only white birds?" I say, "No, Atayi, respected grandfather." I said, "No. But just imagine, close your eyes and imagine that all the white birds are losing their feathers." The next morning, he made all the village laugh because he said, "Oh yes, he dreamt." And there was so much snow that he couldn't see the sun. And that power of imagination is to enable him to create, to conceive something. And my mother used to ask me, "How can the sea freeze? You work on frozen sea, but how can the sea come?" I said, "Well, I took a candle." So you let the candle burn completely. And I say, "Watch the candle." So the candle became hard again. I say, "Yeah, that's the sea frozen." So the cold is so intense that it
compresses,
yes,
and massifies.
Yeah.
So I think we're really out of time, and so I really want to thank Tété-Michel Kpomassie, as well as Johnny Pitts and Elena and the team here at BOZAR, and I want to give a big round of applause to our African in Greenland. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, in Greenland language, Koyanak means thank you. Koyanak.
Koyanak.
Koyanak. Koyanak swak. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Koyanak swak. Koyanak swak.
So Koyanak swak, Tété-Michel Kpomassie. To you, I wanted to say that there's a break now, and you can have food. Yes? Sorry? And yet you can buy books. So Waterstone is still there, selling books. The book of Tété-Michel Kpomassie is already sold out at our place. But you can just tell us if you're interested. We will write your names and then we'll figure out how you can get it. But so now you can just go out to the left and find the Tukul Catering, very delicious Ethiopian food. And we meet again at 8 o'clock, okay, here for a night Black Britain full of poetry, literature, and music. Thank you.